Welcome, everyone. We're tackling a huge topic today, the FDA's Pre-Market Tobacco Product Application, or PMTA. It's a beast. So to make sense of it all, we're going to try something a little different, more of a conversation. I'm Alex, and I'll be coming at this from the perspective of a company trying to get a product through this process. And to help us out, we have Dr. Evans, a regulatory expert who really knows what the FDA is looking for. Dr. Evans, thanks so much for joining me.
Happy to be here, Alex. You know, that question really gets to the core of the problem for so many people. For a smaller business especially, the whole PMTA process can just feel like this giant, expensive wall. The stakes couldn't be higher, so figuring out where to put your time and money, well, that's everything.
And that's the fundamental tension, isn't it? You, the company, are working with limited funds. You need some level of predictability to make smart decisions. But on the other side, the FDA has its mission: protect public health. And to do that, they need solid, comprehensive data for a scientific review. A winning submission has to bridge that gap. It's all about providing the right scientific proof in the smartest, most efficient way possible.
Okay, Dr. Evans, let's start right at square one then. I'm assuming the first thing is just defining the product itself. What does that actually look like in practice?
Yeah, that's a question I get constantly. It feels like they're asking for an impossible amount of detail, right? But from the FDA's viewpoint, it's not about making you do busy work. It's about building a rock-solid foundation that the rest of your entire application will stand on.
So here's what's absolutely crucial. The FDA really boils it down to four main things. First, your design specs, the complete blueprint of every single part. Second, a list of every ingredient, no shortcuts. Third, you need data on the harmful and potentially harmful constituents, the HPHCs, that are actually in the aerosol. And finally, number four, you have to prove the product is stable over its shelf life. If you don't have those four pillars in place, there's no way for them to even begin to assess the risks.
And listen, I really can't say this strongly enough. If your product characterization is incomplete, it's a total non-starter. Think about it. If the FDA can't get a full picture of what your product is and how it works on a chemical level, the review just stops. Everything else, all the expensive toxicology and clinical work, it all hinges on getting this first part right.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So let's say we've perfectly defined what our product is. What comes next? I have to guess it's proving that we can make that exact product over and over again without it changing.
You got it. And honestly, this is where a surprising number of applications just fall apart. The FDA has to be sure that the product people are buying is identical to the product you ran all your tests on. The gaps we see most often? Things like incomplete operating procedures, missing batch records that prove you actually followed your own rules, and a really common one, not having tight control over the final amount of nicotine in the product.
That's fascinating. Why is something so specific, like the nicotine level, so important to them? I mean, if the label says 3%, does it really matter if one batch comes out at 2.8% and the next is 3.2%?
Oh, it matters immensely. That little inconsistency can have huge public health consequences. If the nicotine delivery isn't predictable, a person might start puffing more often or taking bigger drags to get the feeling they're used to. Not only does that increase their exposure to harmful chemicals, but, and this is the killer, it completely undermines all of your expensive clinical studies. Because if the product you studied isn't the same as the one on the market, what did that study really prove?
Wow, that's a really powerful way to put it. You can see how all these pieces are connected. Okay, so let's move on to the big one, the part that I know is usually the most complex and costly, figuring out the product's actual impact on a person.
Exactly. And from a business perspective, this one can be tough to wrap your head around. Companies are spending millions of dollars on human trials to prove something the entire world already knows. Nicotine is addictive. So what is the real reason for these studies?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer is in this term: abuse liability. The FDA isn't just looking at nicotine by itself. They're looking at the abuse liability of your entire product as a system. It's about how your specific liquid, combined with your specific device, delivers that nicotine. The speed, the intensity, that's what determines how addictive a product is, and it can be wildly different from one device to the next.
And this is how they put a number on it. A pharmacokinetic study, or PK study, measures these key things. Cmax shows the highest level of nicotine in the blood, which points to its addiction potential. Tmax tells you how fast it gets there, how quick the hit is, and AUC gives you the total nicotine exposure over time. Put them all together and you get a scientific fingerprint of your product's addictiveness.
Right. So all that data from the PK study lets the FDA answer two absolutely critical questions. One, is your product more or less addictive than a regular cigarette? And two, is it addictive enough to actually help an adult smoker make the switch and stick with it? It's a really delicate balance they're looking for. You need a product that's satisfying enough for a smoker to switch, but not so appealing that it creates a whole new problem.
This has been so helpful, Dr. Evans. You've really connected the dots for me, all the way from the chemicals in the product to manufacturing and how it affects real people. It's still a lot to process, though.
So let me ask you this. If you had to boil this all down to just one single piece of advice for a company like mine, one guiding idea that we should build our whole submission around, what would it be?
Tell your story to the FDA. Every single piece of data you generate, every test you run, it's not just a box you're checking off a list. It's a sentence in a chapter of a much bigger story that you're writing for that reviewer.
A great PMTA tells a complete, logical, evidence-backed story. It starts with, here's what our product is. Then, here's how we make it consistently. Then, here's the proof that it's less harmful. Followed by, here's its specific addiction potential. And you bring it all home with, and here's how it helps adult smokers. When all those pieces link together into one clear, compelling narrative, that's when you've shown the FDA that your product is, in their words, appropriate for the protection of public health. And that, right there, is the whole ballgame.